Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we'll be doing yet another update on the temperatures, more specifically the cool down that is coming. And there is still a little bit of heat left, as if you take a look at the National Weather Service Weather Ready Nation map, you could tell there are heat advisories, heat warnings just about everywhere across the central United States, southern United States, eastern United States, red flag warnings across the west. So a lot of heat still, but the good news is this is going to be pretty short-lived. If you were to take a look at, say, Minneapolis, right, the heat warnings, a lot of them are just for one a day, not for like a whole week, which sometimes you do get with these heat waves. So I want to start off by looking at the 2-meter temperature anomaly of the GFS. So the GFS is my preferred model. I like it, especially more recently. It has been outperforming the European model, which is usually the model that it is most compared to. And do note that right now we are Saturday, right? There's a little bit of heat, a little bit of cool weather, nothing crazy. It's humid. There's a lot of Gulf of Mexico moisture, so even if it's not hot, it's humid. But the thing is that a lot of this cool weather here is mainly attributed to just cloud cover, so nothing really extraordinary. The cool weather will only come in later in the week, closer to Monday or Tuesday, especially Wednesday and Thursday as you get further away from, say, the north central United States. So let me show you this. Notice that as I put this into Sunday, we see the warm air increasing, especially the nighttime anomalies, again, increasing. The nighttime anomalies, for some reason, in the last few years have always been hotter. I talked about that in the last video. Notice Sunday we start getting some pretty hot temperature readings across, say, the Dakotas into the UP of Michigan. These little random pockets. And notice it is a little cooler there. That's mainly to do with some precipitation and cloud cover. If we were to take a look at go back to the 2-meter temperature anomaly, notice though we do see cooler air across large provinces of Canada, including Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia getting in a little bit of that. Notice as I take this into Monday, we really see the heat expanding across a good portion of the United States. Really hot. We have many areas seeing temperatures potentially up to 10 to 15 degrees Celsius above average. So if your average, say, in central Wisconsin is 85, you might be getting close to 95 or 100 degrees Fahrenheit on Tuesday or into Monday. But as I mentioned, this heat wave will be a quick one. Notice that cool air up to the north now moving into the north central United States. By Tuesday, it is covering much of the Dakotas, Minnesota. Still pretty warm across, you could see, say, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky. So don't be surprised if by Tuesday you are still experiencing very warm temperatures across a good portion of the central eastern United States. But that cool off, it will be coming in. And notice that especially during the day, the anomalies are pretty strong in terms of the cool side for once. You could see South Dakota, Montana, Minnesota, Iowa, potentially 10 to 15 degrees below average, finally below average, not above average. Though note that the heat then moves to the northeast, so cities like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, you guys will be dealing with the worst of the heat during the time this cool wave is making its way across the central United States. And if you take a look at the anomalies, or sorry, the actual 2-meter temperature shaded, we have 70s and 60s, so quite frankly, fall-like temperatures compared to what we've been seeing across some of these areas. But then the northeast is baking. Obviously, the south also really hot in some of these areas. Taking a look back at the temperature anomalies, notice that they continue. There will be a little bit of cloud cover as well across the central United States during this time, so that does help with that obvious. It doesn't, if there's no sun, it doesn't allow the atmosphere to heat up as much. And do note that during the nighttime, again, the anomalies aren't going to be as cool. It's still going to be cooler than average, but not nearly as much as compared to the day. Note, though, that by Thursday and into Friday, we see these cooler temperatures spreading across much of the United States for at least a little bit. And do note, in some areas across Nebraska, Iowa, even look at the Mid-Atlantic there. Again, I'm almost willing to bet if you were to take a look at the precipitation map, there is precipitation occurring in those cool areas. But still, there's been a good stretch of a pattern now where we have been seeing not only precipitation, but also very hot temperatures. So now, at least where the precip will be, it will be accompanied with cooler air, much cooler air. Look at some of these thermometer readings. 60s, potentially even not even getting out of the 50s across Nebraska, into southwestern Iowa, and into the mid-Atlantic. You can see some 50-degree readings there. So a lot cooler compared to what we've been seeing. And I'll show you the precipitation graphics in just a little bit more in depthly, but I want to run through this cool off first fully. Unfortunately, for those that like the cool air, you will be getting some, so that's good, but it won't be lasting for too long. Notice it sticks around into the first part of the first weekend of August, into Sunday and Monday, but gradually it kind of disintegrates, dissipates, and unless you are seeing cloud cover, you won't be pretty much seeing cool temperatures by the time we get into the early part of next week. Now, it doesn't seem like there will be a massive heat wave right after that, but a warming pattern and the cool air staying further towards the north. You could see some areas like the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, according to the GFS. Again, at this point, this is pretty far out. You could see they are maintaining a cooler bias, so that's good. Notice the west, however, is really heating up, so that would not be good, especially where the drought areas are. And there are some indications, again, as I mentioned in last video, that there could be a secondary cool-off somewhere around that second weekend of August. The most recent model run you can see isn't too favorable, showing that. It shows a little bit, but if you were to compare it to like the morning model run, you can see this shows a proper, really strong cool down. And this one stretches really far into the deep south. And yeah, so some of these model runs are flipping back and forth, which is why I don't want to focus on anything really past the end of next work week, because the the graphics are going to be a little bit more confusing and just not as reliable. Let's take a look at the European. Despite me not liking it nearly as much, I still want to address it, because if it does show a cool off along with the GFS, then that is a really good sign. Often you get them disagreeing. In that case, I usually go with the GFS. And of course, the higher res models help out in a shorter range once we get to that. Notice the European, just like the GFS, showing a lot of very warm temperatures during the first part of the week across much of the United States. Only really North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana seeing those cool temperatures. Though then we do see that cool air spill into further south, further east, and again the European, just like the GFS, showing the nighttime anomalies aren't as cool as the daytime anomalies, which we'll take what we can get at this point. It's been so cool. Notice the European does drive some of that cooler air further into the south, into Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama. The GFS did not do that, but just like the GFS, it hangs it around for the first part of that weekend, and by early next week, it seems to be kind of dissipating across the continental United States. Though, obviously, your eyes may have caught that. There is a big cool-off that the European is advertising towards southern Canada and extreme northern United States, kind of hanging out there, especially during the day. So, again, that is the same thing the GFS is doing. European is kind of like indecisive. It's showing some signs of a cool-off, like secondary cool-off, but it's not really bringing it further south. You can see it kind of just dissipates, and maybe a little cooler during the day, but during the night, the anomalies are very, very warm, which I kind of just at that point don't really call it a cool off if we can't even get below average temperatures during the night and just during the day. And yeah, you can see the European really heats things back up by the time we get into the second weekend of August, which the GFS similarly does. I want to run through the ensembles with you, so this is just to give you a more average look. So GEFS is, I think, 34 different GFS individual family members, and they kind of combine it into one graphic, one composite, just to show you the average of all models, not just one model, which can flip-flop around quite a bit. Notice they are showing warmth in the first part of this week, that heat wave, those heat warnings that we have, but then pretty unanimously they show that cool-off driving into the central and eastern United States. Pretty far south, you can see gets further south than say what the GFS showed itself. The ensembles drive it further down, but just like the GFS, it by the time we get into the next work week, it kind of pretty much eats that cool down away. Maybe just staying cooler in some spots during the daytime hours, but during the nighttime hours, it won't be much of a difference. As you can see, the anomalies are pretty warm. But I do gotta say that they do linger a little bit of cool air across the central United States for longer than, say, the GFS operational model does, which is interesting. That means that the GFS one that I just showed you by itself might be a little bit more of a outlier, that it shows a little bit more warmer air than its family. So that's why it's good to look at these ensembles, because otherwise you wouldn't have known that. So now we're kind of leaning based on that data. We could assume that the GFS is of the warmer scenario compared to all 34 models, since they are showing a little bit of cooler air than what the GFS did later on. EPS, so the same thing, the European model ensemble. I think this one has like 50 family members to it, so really, really good average. And you know, if there's a cool footprint or a hot footprint, it's usually a pretty good sign that it's going to happen, as that means a lot of models must be in agreement. Just like the GFS, it shows this into the late part of this week and into next week. As the kind of similar to what the European did versus the GFS, the operational models, the European dove it further into the south, and you can see the ensembles also show that cooler air reaching more of the south compared to the GFS ensemble and the operational one. So that is definitely something, a little bit of a difference. But do note that by end of the weekend and into the early work week, that cool down isn't as profound. It is kind of interesting though. Both the ensembles hang around that cool air for longer than, say, the operational ones, the European and GFS themselves. But at that point, again, warmer during the night than average, cooler during the day at average. That's not a cool down. That's pretty average, right? So for now, we just have confidence in that first cool off happening and lasting into around the first part of the work week. Not this upcoming one, but the next one. After that, it remains to be seen. The Climate Prediction Center, again, the August 1st through 5th. So, yeah, pretty much the cool off, a little bit clipping off some of the days, especially towards the Dakotas, as that will be occurring before then. But notice it's favoring below average temperatures across much of Illinois, Iowa, the Northeast, and even to the Southwest. Precipitation-wise, staying pretty wet, especially across the Northwest and Southeast, maybe drying out across the Northeastern United States. And the 8 to 14-day outlook, you can see it's kind of a wash, which is what the ensembles are showing. Pretty much average. Some spots a little cooler, some spots a little warmer, and that's really probably going to be dependent on where the precipitation falls. And the precipitation outlook, speaking of which, is also pretty normal. Some areas, generally, they are favoring a wetter pattern, but nothing extraordinary. No real risk of any massive storms as of right now that I'm noticing. And I will show you right now a little brief rundown of the precipitation. Do note that the GFS keeps it active even during this heat wave. Pockets of storms, showers developing, and with all that heat and humidity, you already know that these storms will be very strong and probably filled with a lot of moisture and precipitation. So where that does happen, there will be a lot of rain. Note though that by that Wednesday, Tuesday time frame, this is kind of that cold front. You can see it stretching out across Iowa, Illinois. Things do cool down. There's that high pressure, really weak one, but it's there nonetheless and drives that some of that cooler air. Do note the little bit of snow, a little bit of blue showing up across Quebec. So that is definitely showing you guys that it is a little bit of a cooler than average pattern. And obviously, while that cool down, I guess, is underway, there will be mainly sunny and cool conditions, and that precipitation will be kept towards the areas where the warmer temperatures are, which you could see it favors kind of the southern United States. But eventually, once that cool down breaks, you can see the precipitation comes right back in, and the pattern breaks into more of what we've been seeing, kind of a wet west to east zonal flow. And some of the areas that have been seeing a lot of precipitation will continue to seem to get a lot of that precipitation. European model, pretty similar. I prefer the GFS again, but notice it shows a lot of precipitation across the Midwest during this heat wave, but then once that cool off happens, it kind of dries things out, keeps the precipitation towards the south, southeast. So the south will definitely be getting a little bit of more activity while this cool down is pushing all that moisture to the south. But after a while, it breaks, and we see just more precipitation across, again, kind of a zonal flow across the United States. Nothing really incredible on the precipitation side, just pretty wet pattern, aside from that little bit of cool air that we get and that little break that happens. Alright, that's pretty much it, guys. I just wanted to give you an update on this cool down. So if you had any work you wanted to do outside, you will know when to do that across your area, probably, again, favoring the early part of this week, depending on where you are, up until maybe even late week if you are across the Northeast, because Wednesday, Tuesday, you will still be very hot across New York City and New York City, Boston, Philadelphia, all those cities and metropolitan areas. Well, at the same time, at that point, it will be very cool across Nebraska and the Dakotas. And then once we get into the weekend, it seems most areas will be finally cool. Alright, so that is basically it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next episode. See ya. Bye.